Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Esnyx Knives Silverline Beer Buster Jr. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Knife Joy for sending this guy along. They said, hey Nick, we got something interesting and new coming out. You want to take a look at it time? I said, yeah, absolutely. I told them though, I'm going to talk about, as always, the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They still sent it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, size comparison. This is not a particularly large knife. We'll start off actually by comparing it to a ruler. And what we're going to see here is this is just a hair over 2.5 inches, right? So it is not a particularly large blade. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica, and your Ontario Rat number 2 is around here somewhere. Here we go. And so what we see is this is small, right? This is substantially smaller than the Delica in the handle, substantially smaller than the Rat 2 in the handle. This is not a large knife here at all. And in terms of sharpened blade length, we are even shorter than the Delicas, so this is not big. And then here it is against the Spyderco PM2, and in this case, it's actually wearing a fancy set of scales from Plytanium, but it is the normally sized PM2 otherwise, and what we see here is this is a very small knife. Then one other piece that I think merits a comparison here is this little guy right here. This is the Pena Knives Front Flipper Zulu, right? And what we're going to see is that these actually have some genetic similarities, both in terms of being modern traditional knives and in terms of the inner workings, so to speak. But nonetheless, this is substantially smaller than the Zulu. Particularly in the handle, this is a much smaller knife. So there you go. Next thing, this is based on, well, who the heck is Esnyx? Well, Esnyx is a person, actually. He's a dude who makes custom knives and has made the Beer Buster model, which is generally a slip joint, for a long time. And he is apparently collaborating, and they've come up with this really cool little piece of the Silverline kind of affair here. And so what we've ended up with is something very different from the customs, but that is addressing sort of the same overall shape and gives an interesting set of options. And then one final thing to note is that I am filming this video before this piece has actually gone live, so to speak. So you will be seeing this review around the same time that it drops. But I've had this guy for a while now in a stealthy capacity and have done the carry and such. So yeah, I've had this for about 2 weeks now, and I don't even know when it's coming out yet. But anyways, so you're seeing this on the channel a little bit early, but I've had plenty of time to spend with it. So I'm going to go on ahead and give you the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, it does have a very small, compact size. For many people, that's not going to be amazing, but for me, it really is nice, right? It is a very small, very carryable sort of knife. This is pretty straightforward. Like, it's almost small enough that this is going to fit in the coin pocket of a lot of pants, right? The overall handle length of this guy underneath the, if you've got like 2 3/4, 3 inches worth of depth in a pocket, this is going to fit in there. And so as a result, this is relatively small and can carry very, very nicely. It kind of disappears in there. And part of the reason it disappears in the pocket is that this is relatively lightweight. This is, like I said, just a hair over 2.5 inches, and we're coming in here at 1.87 ounces. That's not a whole lot. And considering that the entire, the interior is titanium, etc., the exterior is all micarta, yeah, that would make sense. But anyways, so there is that. Next thing, this is a weird little thing, and I don't know that it's actually good, but it is unique. This is a knife that stands up on its end. It's actually somewhat uncommon in the knife world. I can't really think of other knives in my collection that do that, but this one does, and because it's kind of got this whole affair, it's a weird thing, but I just set it down. It's like, whoa. That's weird. That is completely irrelevant, but I'm going to go on ahead and mention it because why not? Next thing, the internals on this guy. If we take a look at the, when I first got this, I thought, oh, cool, okay, it's like the Beer Buster, but then I flipped it over. It's like, well, hold on, I'm having trouble wait, this just popped. Oh, God, it's a front flipper. And then looking at the front flipping mechanism, looking at the internals and such, it looked a lot like some of the Pena knives. And in fact, if we look at the front flipper Zulu here, which we'll see is pretty substantially similar, it makes sense, right? This is a lot of the same internals as that. My understanding is that Enrique Pena is very much on board and supportive of this. But as a result, this knife has a very solid set of bones, right? That idea, that space, that approach, how to do this all right, is already well sort of established. And as a result, I think they've avoided a lot of growing pains in there. I like seeing that kind of relatively painless collaboration where makers are helping each other out and allowing each other to learn from what they've done. I love that just sort of individually, but I think as a result, this knife has come out very strong as a first entry because I think it's taking advantage. What's the saying? If I have seen far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. I think that there's an advantage there, right? Next thing, this has a very nice blade to it. So the steel on this is M390, which is unfortunately not marked on the blade, which I think I have in the bad at some point, but nonetheless, they should mark that on the blade. But nonetheless, the steel is M390, and it has a very nice shape to it. It is it's got this nice long flat portion here. It's got a little tiny bit of belly and then a tip, and so as a result, you almost get a surface that's a little bit scrapey here at the top, which I like, and it's a very traditional looking thing, but you've also got a subtle swedge on there, right? You've got the nail nick, which certainly is going to capture crud some of your time, but it also can be attractive here, and it adds to the overall traditional aesthetic to the whole thing. So I think the blade is very nice, and it's ground well, and it's made of M390, which is a great steel, and which is generally handled well by Rayot, who is the factory making these guys. So I gotta say, I like the blade. It cuts very well. It's a nice little tool. Next thing, the design on this guy is pretty interesting, right? This is absolutely not the first knife with a bottle opener. Do not believe I'm saying that, right? There are lots of knives out there with different approaches to opening bottles. For some cases, it's like another thing on the inside there that pops out. In some cases, there's a cutout in the scale, etc. But it's a nice approach to having a bottle opener there, and it's pretty good both in terms of utility. I did use this on a number of bottles, and given they were ginger beer, but I figure that probably works the same as the hard stuff, right? But nonetheless, this guy works very well to open a bottle, but it also doesn't hurt the ergos too much, right? I can still grip this as normal, and there's really not much, there's a little tiny bit of this pushing into my hand here, and I can see that maybe being a bigger concern if I had gigantic meat paws rather than relatively smaller hands, but nonetheless, it works pretty well, and honestly, it doesn't really take away any of the utility here. The worst thing you can say about it is you've got a bottle opener taped to the back of your knife, and that's not the end of any worlds. And it is, by the way, like I said, an effective bottle opener, and, so, yeah, that's great, that works. So, to me, all of that is the good here, is that it is an effective bottle opener and an interesting design that keeps the bottle opener out of the ergos and makes the knife still work well in the hand. It's got a nice blade, nice internals. It is very, very lightweight. It can actually stand up on end if you're not putting it on a soft surface like my review table material, and it has a very nice small size. On the great side, to me, this is a very traditional knife that isn't, right? Because you get things like the blade shape, which feels very traditional, right? It's almost a little sodbustery, maybe? I'm not as up on the traditional lingo, so to speak, but it looks very traditional to me. If you take a look at this knife, you're just like, oh, cool, slip joint, right? And then you see this on the back, you're like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. And then the other thing that's actually worth noting is this has a shield on it, right? Well, technically it has a bottle, not a shield, but the term in the traditional world for this is a shield. This is a little piece of metal, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. This is a little piece of metal that has been inlaid into the micarta, and I believe this metal here to be titanium. Actually, I can kind of check that by just using a magnet here. Yeah, this is your titanium here, and the titanium is just inlaid in there, and it just adds a little bit of traditionality to it. That's not a term, but I guess it is now. But it's got the nice micarta look to it as well. This is actually a fabricy micarta here. It has the nail nick on there, and it's also kind of the beer buster style, right? This is sort of an Esnyx signature thing, and so as a result, it looks a lot like his work, which is undeniably traditional. But it's also very much not, with the front flipping approach, with actually having a pocket clip, with having a bottle opener on the back of it, right? So there are a lot of things here that it does very traditionally, and in many ways more so than the Pena front flipper series, especially the X series, right, where they have the titanium bolsters and such. This, in a lot of ways, feels more traditional, but is also very much not. So to me, I like that interplay of modern and traditional at the same time, and I think this does it really well, and to me, that's what's great. The bad side. Start with the price is not bad, it's fine, right? The price here is $295. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money, and compared to a lot of your traditional knives in the world, that's high, it's up there. But it is also substantially different from a lot of the traditional knives, both in terms of the build quality. This is impeccably made, right? The centering is dead on, it is deconstructible, disassemblable, I think, is the proper term. I guess you could deconstruct it if you wanted to be a dick about it, but nonetheless, it's very much easy to take apart. It's unique, and it's from a maker whose work has not been widely available, right? This kind of thing has been available as a custom and nowhere else, and so having that out more widely available in the world is great. I mean, sure, I'd love to see it at like $200 or something like that, but honestly, I think it is being well enough done here. There's nothing I can really point to and say, wow, you cut a corner, wow, you screwed up, that I think people will pay that price without a whole lot of trouble. So the price on it is fine. It's okay. It's not oh my god value, but it's also not ripping me off either. So there you go. Next thing, this is relatively small. So this will tend to both favor smaller hands, like my own, and it's not going to be your greatest choice for, cutting a birthday cake or something like that, right? This is not a particularly gigantic knife, and so you're going to want to keep that in mind. That said, this is the junior. That would sort of imply that the senior is coming at some point in time. There will probably be a much larger size, but there you go. Next thing, this guy is coming in just over a legal limit here. At least here in the U.S., there are a number of municipalities that have 2.5 inches as a legal law, where you cannot carry something that is over that size, and this is indeed over that size. And it always feels like, dude, did you need that extra, I don't know, did you need that little extra eighth of an inch on there? Is that winning us much? Probably not, but for some people it might have been. So I don't love seeing him go just right over that line. Next thing, this is a very shallow carry, right? This much of this knife is going to be sticking up out of your pocket, being pretty generous, right? And so you've got not only something that can snag a little bit on here, but you also just have a bunch of stuff hanging out the top of your pocket, and that's, something you want to keep in mind. Next thing, the clip on this guy is, unfortunately, this is very traditional looking, but this clip is in there such that you can remove it. You can pull these guys out, but it leaves behind a little bit of a hole in the G10. I'm sorry, in the micarta in this case. And that's not necessarily something that's amazing, especially if you're planning to carry this in a classical kind of slip joint slip. Next thing, the micarta on this guy actually came very dry. What I mean is you kind of looked at it and it looked a lot like, well, fabric, right? It was very soft. Not soft necessarily, but it was very dry. What I've done here is actually I've used a little bit of wax on there just to get it both darkened up a little bit, as well as to remove some of the sort of fabric-y feel to it. But nonetheless, maybe this guy is a little bit closer to that, where you just see a lot more of the texture, you see a lot more of the whiteness. You can see a little bit of that coming back where the wax is worn off underneath the clip from carrying, but nonetheless, it came a little bit dry. Next thing, I would kind of like to see a little bit more prominence up here. I'd like to see this part go up a little bit higher, and I'd like to see a little tiny bit more of the front flipping area right here, because I feel like that would just make this more reliable to deploy than it already is. Mind you, it is already pretty reliable. I can't get too bad out of shape about it, but I would like to see just a little bit more than that, especially for the classical kind of front flipper approach, right? And then finally on the bad side, there is a very slight tendency because you see right here, how you unlock this knife is you push this liner over in this direction. Get in here and then you press. Did I really just do that? Wow, I am so dumb. Luckily, I got my fingernail, but this is how you do not do a knife review, people. Anyways, that was a really bad way to show off how you unlock a knife, but and I didn't expect how quick and I do it again, wow. I didn't expect the action to be that good, but nonetheless, I'm uninjured, life is good. But you need to press this guy over, generally speaking, using your thumb. Right, and the downside to this is that there is this little gap right here behind the lock bar here. And as you're forcing your thumb down in there, very often as you're putting that kind of tension in, what you end up doing is pinching a part of your thumb between the lock bar and the actual scale here, and that's not something you end up with on, for instance, a bolster lock like the Pena here, where there's nothing on the other side there. And so as a result, I'd like to see a little bit more scoop out here, such that I can more easily get my thumb in there and push without doing that little pinch thing, or maybe raise the liner up a little bit more proud, or give me a little bit more texture so I don't have to grab as hard. But I feel like there's something that can be done to remove that little bit of pinching. And ideally something that can be done to turn me into a brilliant man so I don't nearly cut myself on camera live during a review. That's asking a little bit much, but I don't feel like that part is. So, anyways, that to me is the bad, is that I am an idiot. I'm an idiot. I can't even say the word idiot right. Wow, damn, I'm good. There is a slight tendency for your finger flesh to be caught in this area right here. You might want a little bit more prominence on the top flipper here. The micarta came a little bit dry feeling. The clip can't be removed without leaving a hole. There is a free spinning, shallow screwed pivot. Did I not mention that? I am on the top of my freaking game today. It is a very shallow carry. It favors smaller hands, and the price is fine. On the final conclusion, there's nothing ugly here, so final conclusion, except the guy behind the camera. On the final conclusion front, this is a very nice little object, and it's a very nice first showing from Esnyx, right? This is jumping straight to the front of the line, right? He's working with a very good factory and seems to be taking inspiration from all the right people to bring something like this to life. I think there's a lot of joy here because it's got a nice size. It stands up if that's important to you. It's got a lightweight, nice internals, a great blade, an interesting design, a very effective bottle opener, and a feeling of tradition while still breaking a lot of the rules, which I think is kind of excellent. The price is fine. It favors smaller hands. The pivot is free spinning and shallow. So is the carry. Well, carry's not free spinning. Well, I guess if you were like rotating in the air for some reason, then it would free spin with you. But nonetheless, if you're in space, the clip can't be pulled on without leaving, or pulled out without leaving a hole. The micarta was a little bit dry. The top flipper needs a little bit more meat, I feel, on it. And the scales make the lock bar a little bit pinchy and make the reviewer look like an idiot. But on the whole, I gotta say I like this, right? It's a relatively new maker. I'm sorry, it's a new maker in the production scene. Esnyx has been around for a while in the custom world, but it's a new maker in the production scene, doing production work that should be much more readily available to the world, right? And it's both an interesting take on the idea of a bottle opening knife, as well as an interesting take on the idea of a traditional knife. And I think it is profoundly well done. Everything that is meant to be done is, by and large, done well. I have little tweaks to suggest, but by and large, it's quite good, right? And so on the whole, I feel like it's good. I like it. It's not meant, though, I think, to be everything to every person, right? It is an excellent knife for daily carry for somebody who wants to do so, right? I carried this guy, and it was a perfectly valid companion for me. There are going to be things that 2.5 inches isn't going to be quite enough for, but you know what? At the same time, it works, right? It's a solid choice, but there are a lot of knives in that category under $300 that are also really solid choices. So instead, I think this is a knife that is going to be for a very particular person, a very particular collector, right? You have to love the style of this knife. That's kind of a sine qua non, right? If you're looking at this and like, I don't know, then don't do it, right? You have to love the size. You have to want this to be relatively small. Otherwise, wait around for the senior, which I imagine will probably be a thing at some point. You do have to love front flipping, right? That is a thing, right? And I feel like this works very well, both in the that kind of approach or the more conventional, lighter style front flip. It works, but you have to like that as an approach, and you have to love bottled beverages, because otherwise it's kind of weird for me to carry around the freaking bottle opener. It's like, yeah, ginger beer, right? One a day. That's about where I'm at. So it is a very different thing. You have to love all of those things. But if all of those things are true, you love the size, the style, the flipping, and the bottled beverages, then by God, this is going to be a gem for you. And frankly, it is pretty much a gem as it stands more generally, right? I think that this is a great little knife. It's a really great first showing, and I think for a lot of people, this will be a great companion. And so picking one of these guys up for you, I don't think is going to be a bust. You'll barely think twice about picking one up? This might snick around in your collection? Okay, anyways. Sorry, I've been keeping all these puns bottled up. Okay, no cap. That one was for the Zoomers out there. Hope this has been interesting to you. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day and be smarter than I am. Bye now.